Hello everybody and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 717. It is Sunday, March the 10th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, I've now had a chance to read the entire testimony of Bruce Ohr that was released. And, well, I should say all the testimony with the questions asked by the Republicans. I had pretty much skipped. I did scan a little bit, but the questions asked by the Democrats, and it wasn't any Democrat politicians, by the way. It was obviously Democrat staff investigators, because they're not, the two questioners was a male and a female, and they never, they're not members of Congress, so they're obviously congressional attorneys or investigators or whatever. But on the Republican side, it was actually Gowdy led off, then Ratcliffe, then Meadows, then Jordan. And they all had follow-ups throughout the thing. So I've had a chance to read all the questions asked by the four Republicans to Bruce Ohr. Took me a while to get through it, but I did get through it all. And we're going to go through it, and that's going to occupy most of today's video. There are just a couple of things I'll get to here real quick, and then I'll give you my general take on the whole thing, and then we'll go into some specific things that Bruce Ohr said. Some of these are new, that we've never heard before. Some of these are things we've heard, rumored, and are now confirmed. So let's go ahead and just hit a few of these things first of all before we get started. Well, of course, we talked about yesterday, Jussie Smollett, the fearmonger, was given a 16-count indictment in Chicago. And he, of course, came out immediately and said that he's innocent. Okay, so keep in mind what we're talking about here now. I went through this about 2 weeks ago. When he says he's innocent, what he means is that he is going to blame his behavior on his drug addictions. Therefore, he's innocent in his mind. I didn't do these things. The drugs made me do them. I'm innocent. The drugs are guilty of making me do this. That's what he means. He's not saying that he's not guilty of carrying out the plot. Oh yeah, he's guilty of carrying out the plot. That means he's guilty. What he's going to, the argument that's going to be made in court by his very weak attorney, and I know everybody says this guy's a great attorney. I watch him on CNN. I would never want this guy representing me. What they mean, what Smollett and his attorney mean when they say he's not guilty, is what they mean is that he was under the influence of some sort of narcotics, which kept him from or caused him to make the mistakes he made and commit the crime he committed. But this was all premeditated, and there's a lot of reasons why that's probably not going to fly, but it's really all he's got. It's the sympathy card. He's going to go out there and try to throw himself on the court and say, I have a horrible drug problem, I'm an addict, it's a disease, it's a disorder, it caused me to do all these horrible things I would never have done. That's what this is all going down to. So he's claiming he's innocent, but that's what he means by he's innocent. That's the argument he will be making. Now, his attorney, who I watched on about a 3 or 4 minute interview with on CNN with what's his name, the heir to the glory of Vanderbilt fortune, what's his name, the one gay guy, silver hair, black glasses, whatever his name is. And they're friends, by the way. He's very good friends of this attorney, Mr. Gregarigus, or whatever his name is. And it was hard to watch, to be quite honest with you. Again, all he's doing is attacking the media, and so his attorney is on CNN, and he says, he's essentially blaming the media for the indictments. In fact, he even throws out the term that it's been a media gangbang, that the media has turned on him. And I'm like, well, what do you expect, dude? Your client comes out and he launches this fake hate crime, and they're all over it. And they're giving him all this positive coverage, putting the microphone on him, the camera on him, letting him tell his story, and they're sucking every bit of it up, even though it sounded really, really bad at first. That's why I stayed off the story for almost 2 solid weeks. I didn't touch it, because I'm like, man, there's something going on here, and it's why I know what's really going on. I'm not even going to comment. Okay, so I didn't jump into the clickbait game, because I don't care about clickbait, but I just didn't jump. Some stories, man, if you've ever seen me, you read about a story, you hear about a story, and I don't talk about it, it's not because I haven't heard about it. It's just because there's something about it that I don't like, and I'm hesitant, and I want to know what it's about before I jump on the bandwagon. So this was that exact situation. I was hearing about it just like all of you and everyone else. But for 2 weeks, I'm like, there's too many things that don't add up here, and I'm just going to wait on this one. And I did, and I was correct in doing so. Now, he throws out the term media gangbang. And it's funny because you didn't hear any complaining when they were giving his client all the opportunity to come out and tell his story and spread this. And remember how bad this was. He was claiming that white guys associated with Trump attacked him with a rope and poured bleach on him and all this sort of stuff. I mean, this could have triggered riots. It could have triggered a lot of bad things. Could have got people killed. And it's a very ugly thing that he did. So, and to be saying that the media is gangbanging him, well, I mean, I think they're actually being pretty easy on him, comparatively speaking, for what he did. I don't sit around and watch CNN and MSNBC and all these channels or anything like that, but I mean, I haven't seen him get near the backlash that I thought he would get on CNN or even on social media. I mean, they all seem to be pretty quiet about it to me. There was a few commenters the day after the police chief came out and announced that they were going to indict him and stuff. You saw some people, oh, how disappointed they were, but you didn't see people giving him a lot of hate or anything. So, anyway, this is kind of a story that was going around yesterday. Smollett, of course, his response to the indictments, he's innocent. Just want you to know that when he says he's innocent, that doesn't mean he's going to go in there with his attorney and say that all the evidence they have is wrong and they've got it all wrong and he didn't do it. That's not at all what's going to happen. They got solid evidence, believe me, or they would never have come out as strongly as they did. They wouldn't have 16 indictments. They got the overwhelming evidence. I'm pretty sure the two brothers, the Nigerians, who are not Nigerians, I'm pretty sure that they spilled their guts and told the whole thing, So no, the defense is going to be that he was on drugs and therefore not responsible for his actions. That's what they mean by not guilty. Okay, so in other words, his attorney isn't saying he didn't do it. Smollett isn't coming out and saying he didn't do it. They're saying he's not guilty. That's a legal term for meaning the state didn't prove their case, or else they were able to beat the case by proving that he wasn't responsible for the actions he took. That is all this means. And I'm sure most of you know that because, again, I have the smartest subs on YouTube. So you guys have already probably got this figured out as well. So then yesterday we also talked about the fact that Ilhan Omar made that nasty tweet about Obama. It's on the record. She made the nasty tweet. She tweeted it out. I read it to you. I read you the tweet. And there was a couple more that I didn't read. Or other parts of that tweet that I didn't read. She sent like 3 tweets. I gave you a couple sentences of one of them. But there was actually even more that she said about Obama. It's really dissing Obama, calling him essentially a murderer. Well, today she has flipped the script, and now Omar is now backing down from what she said in her comments on Twitter, and she's now saying that she is a fan of Obama. She's a fan of Obama, the murderer. The drone striker in chief. She's got a lot of problems, my friend, and she's going to create even more problems. What they should have done was really censored her, kicked her off the committee, and really put the clamp on her. They should have taken that rag off of her head and shoved it down her throat. That's what they should have done, but they didn't. And that's why she's coming back for more. She's not going to shut up, nor is her friend, Miss Tlaib, who's clearly an anti-Semite. Neither is Cortez. Pelosi has done nothing more than empower these people, and they are going to get even more radical and say even crazier things that will get Pelosi in even more trouble. This is a very, very this party's going over the cliff, man. And I don't say that just off the top of my head because they're crazy. We all know they're crazy. I'm talking about the fact that the Democrats after 2016 changed some rules about how they're going to, elect their nominees for president. A couple of the things they did, number one thing they did was they created a new rule, which is that any candidate in the primaries that gets 15% gets delegates. They also moved a couple of the big states up front instead of at the end. They now have Texas and California are going to be one of the earlier states voting with all those electoral votes. And where are those 2 states going to go? Well, they love Beto in Texas on the left, And we know who they love on the left in California, Bernie Sanders. They've set themselves up to get screwed in a way. But they've also given themselves the perfect play to get out of it and to end up getting the establishment candidate anyway. Because what will happen is they will get to the convention, and now because they're going to have all them delegates, the proportionality of the delegates, you only need 15% to get delegates. Instead of coming into the convention with their nominee already decided, clearly having won, what they're going to have now is they're going to have probably 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 people show up at the convention with not a single one of them having enough delegates to clinch it. And it will have to be decided at the convention with a floor vote. So what happens is the first time they have a floor vote, it's just the delegates voting. Well, they're probably still not going to secure enough delegates in the first vote. It rarely happens. People pretty much stick to their guns. It's almost like a revote, a reconfirmation of where they are now. And only after the first vote, when it goes to the second vote, do you actually see the movement happen. So what they put in place was a rule that the superdelegates could not chime in until the second round. So they'll go into the Democratic convention probably without a clear winner or a clear nominee. They'll have 2, 3, 4, 5 people probably with enough delegates to be in play. No one with enough delegates to clearly win. They'll have the vote, the first vote. They'll still have nobody with enough delegates. Then they'll go to the second vote. And in the second vote, the super delegates get to chime in. And they carry about 800 and some odd delegates. And so the super delegates in the second vote will decide the candidate, and they will go for the establishment. That is how they're going to cut Bernie's legs out from underneath him at the convention if he makes it that far. That's ultimately what's going to happen, and it's going to create a complete chaos. At the Democratic convention is going to be complete chaos. It's going to be just like 68 all over again. And it's going to just destroy this party. It's going to just destroy this party. And I'll be happy to see it. And keep in mind, there's going to be 10 Democratic primary debates. Imagine how destructive that's going to be. Imagine how much fun we're going to have watching the Democratic primary debates. And they're coming up. So, 10 of them. So, man, oh man, I don't think they can survive 10 of them. I mean, by that time, I don't know if there'll be a party left to have a convention. It's just going to be a freak show, and we're going to have a front row seat. Well, Nicholas Sandmann is going to hit CNN with a $250 million lawsuit on Monday. On Monday, CNN is going to get hit with a $250 million lawsuit. This kid's going to get rich, man. And he probably deserves it. This is kind of unrelated to the Bruce Orr document dump, but it's in regards to Christopher Steele, and I think this came from a deposition, this deposition that Christopher Steele did recently. And keep in mind, we're going to be getting the stuff from the BuzzFeed case coming out this week as well. But just on an isolated note here, it appears from this deposition that Steele did that he was making a very strong effort trying to protect Nellie Orr and Ed Baumgartner. Nellie Orr and Ed Baumgartner were two people that Steele was really trying hard to protect for some reason. Now, I think I know the reason. I think you do too. But what's interesting to note here is that Nellie Orr was Ed Baumgartner's teacher at Vassar in Russian studies. Okay, so let's get to the Bruce Orr revelations here. And first, just as a general overall view on this thing, I was surprised Bruce Orr's demeanor in the hearings. He wasn't combative, and he was pretty cooperative, to be honest with you. He answered most of the questions he was asked. There was a couple times that an attorney jumped in and issued caution about answering a question, but for the most part, he answered questions, and it wasn't a very combative situation. He was fairly open and answered directly pretty much the questions he was asked. There was a few times where he couldn't, but most of the time he answered questions. He acknowledged that what he did was not good, that he shouldn't have done it. But I don't think he fully understood at the time that it was all going down exactly how big this was and everything. He didn't know about all the other things going on around him. All he knew is what was just happening between him and Steele and Simpson and his wife. And giving this information to the FBI. I don't think he fully understood everything that was going on around him, or he probably would have walked away from it. But my initial thoughts after going through, I think the first thing that crossed my mind after I finished reading through all this was that Glenn Simpson better lawyer up. Because Glenn Simpson is clearly caught in multiple, 3, 4, maybe 5 lies, hardcore lies, clear lies, not even just missing a few things or bad memory. We're talking about straight up, flat out lies. And Gowdy, Meadows, Jordan, and Ratcliffe, every single one of them in their questioning hit him on this point, hit Bruce Orr with that, telling him, Glenn Simpson says that he never had any contact with anybody at the FBI or DOJ. And Bruce Orr emphatically, to all 4 of them, said, well, I'm telling you, I communicated with Glenn Simpson. I met with him twice. So, Glenn Simpson is probably the person, the individual most damaged by the Bruce Orr testimony. Single-handedly the most damaged. And Nellie Orr may be the second most damaged. He was trying to protect her, but it was nearly impossible to do. But Glenn Simpson better lawyer up. He better lawyer up, man, because Bruce Orr made him out to be a complete liar. And he is, of course. And so I would say that Glenn Simpson, if you're looking at anyone in this entire scandal that's probably going to be scapegoated and is going to go to jail or face some serious penalties, it's Glenn Simpson. I can almost assure you of that. This dude is not going to get away with it. Maybe some of these, maybe the Comeys and the Clappers and people like that, maybe they find a way to wiggle off the hook. But Glenn Simpson, he's dead. He's dead to nuts, gone, done. I'm telling you right now. Bruce Orr's testimony crucifies Glenn Simpson, period. So let's go ahead and go through some of these things that are in the transcript of the testimony of Bruce Orr. And remember, the 4 questioners on the Republican side are Gowdy, Jordan, Meadows, and Ratcliffe. So we learned from Bruce Orr that Nellie Orr, and this is something we heard rumored, but now it's confirmed. Nellie started working for Fusion GPS in late 2015. Exactly the time that those 702 queries were being done that Mike Rogers discovered and brought to the attention of the FISA judge. Nellie Orr was working much earlier. We were told originally it was in the late spring, around April of 2016. But no. Bruce Orr confirms his wife was working for Fusion GPS in late 2015. Here's something else. Here's something we didn't know that we now know. Nellie was also at the same time, in this period of time, working for the Department of Justice National Security Division, the DOJ NSD, and the CIA. Brennan. Simultaneously, as she was working for Confusion GPS, she was also working for the DOJ NSD and the CIA. We also learned that Nellie Orr wasn't the only one who gave Bruce a memory stick to hand off to his FBI handler. Glenn Simpson personally gave a memory stick to Bruce Orr. Orr says he didn't look to see what was on it, but he assumed it was the dossier. Bruce Orr first met with Andy McCabe back in August of 2016. And it was McCabe who put Bruce Orr in contact with Peter's Been Stroking Us. Then they gave him an FBI handler. And that person became the intermediary between Orr and Strzok. But the first person that he went to after having these conversations with Steele was Andrew McCabe. Bruce Orr confirms the FBI was paying Christopher Steele. They were paying him at the same time he was being paid by either Perkins Coie or Fusion GPS. We're not sure exactly whose name was on the check, but he was either being paid directly by Perkins Coie or by Perkins Coie through Fusion GPS. But Orr confirms the FBI was paying Christopher Steele. That's not good. Orr says that both Steele and Simpson discussed with him Manafort and Carter Page, the two central characters in the dossier, and Michael Cohen also would have been included in those conversations. But the majority of their conversations with Steele and Simpson were telling Bruce Orr they were focused really hard on Manafort and Carter Page. Bruce Orr spoke with Simpson on August of 2016. Spoke with Simpson in August of 2016. That was before the election, long before the election. And he says that they have known each other for over a decade and have shared info on DOJ related matters over the years. So, Simpson and Bruce Orr knew each other very well. Glenn Simpson provided Bruce Orr with info on intermediaries between Russia and the Trump campaign. And these intermediaries, where do you hear who they are? Pretty much who we had heard they were. And neither of them are Russians or a part of Putin's government or anything like that. It's the same characters. Glenn Simpson told Bruce Orr that Sergei Milian was a possible source for Steele. And again, just as I told you, no Russians who were part of Putin's government, no intelligence officials, high-up intelligence officials in Russia, were any part, shape, way, or form any source for anything. When they say Russians, they're talking about guys like Sergei Milian, a guy who is a Russian, but is not part of Putin's government, does not live in Russia, he lives in New York. He's in New York. He's an international. He's an international person of Russian descent. Travels around the world. Lives in the United States. Lives in New York. He's a citizen here. Has been for years. Not some creepy Russian intelligence guy inside the Putin government, which is what they've always wanted to try to say, is that Trump was colluding with these Russians close to Putin. None of these guys have anything to do with Putin. Putin would have nothing to do with them, and they're not really. They are Russian only by birth, but they're essentially internationalist types who live in the States or live in Canada or live in Europe. They're not like what we were told. And of course, we knew about Milian. We've known about him for more than 2 years. So in this Q&A with Bruce Orr, Trey Gowdy kept trying to figure out why Steele and Simpson used Bruce Orr as an intermediary with the FBI. I mean, why not talk to them themselves? And of course, Bruce Orr was never able to really give a solid answer as to why. He told Trey Gowdy, in the case of Glenn Simpson, he said, hey, why don't you just go tell the FBI yourself? But for whatever reason, Glenn Simpson did not want to deal directly with the FBI. He wanted to use Bruce and Nellie to pump the stuff into the FBI. Steele was already, according to Bruce Orr, and of course we know, Bruce Orr says, well, I was talking to Steele, but he was talking directly to the FBI through multiple channels at the FBI and directly talking to the media and directly communicating with this guy and that guy and this guy. So, in his case, Steele was talking to the FBI, but in the case of Simpson, for whatever reason, wanted to use Bruce Orr, even though Bruce said, hey, why are you using me as an intermediary? Why don't you just go to the FBI yourself? Simpson was using Bruce and Nellie Orr to pump his information into the FBI because he's one of the central authors of the dossier, not Christopher Steele, just as I've told you. Bruce Orr says he wasn't really sure who Steele's sources were, other than the fact that he mentioned Milian and he mentioned Deripaska. And in fact, that email that we saw that the name was redacted, the page struck texts or whatever that we saw that was redacted, the name that was redacted when they were referring to an email from Strzok to Orr, where they're talking about, quote, our favorite business tycoon. They were, in fact, talking about Oleg Deripaska. And Deripaska, according to Orr, had information about Manafort, who didn't, that he got from some guy named Paul Hauser, who was the attorney working for Deripaska. So this dude, Paul Hauser, we'll need to look into him and find out who he's connected to. Haven't had time, but I will get to it. Bruce Orr says he was getting, says that the information he was getting was hearsay and could not have been used in court. At some point in the Q&A, Trey Gowdy goes through this entire thing of evidence and the chain of custody of evidence and how the evidence was collected and all this sort of thing with Bruce Orr. And he said, look, you're a career DOJ lawyer. I mean, you know how all this works. You're feeding this stuff to the FBI. They're using it to do all these things, at which point get FISA warrants and all these things, at which point Bruce Orr says, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't know they were using this stuff to get FISA warrants. I didn't know they were launching investigations. I knew they were looking into some things around Trump and people around Trump, but I didn't know about all these investigations and FISA warrants. And yes, Mr. Gowdy, you're absolutely correct. You could never go into court with the dossier or anything, and he said, and the reason would be because you would not be able to cross-examine. And for that reason, it would be considered hearsay, and you would not be able to be used in court. So clearly, Bruce Orr, Trey Gowdy gets him to admit, and he has no problem doing so. Bruce Orr is not fighting him at all. He's totally on board with Trey Gowdy. Going, oh yeah, man, 100%. You got to remember, I didn't know they were getting FISA warrants. I didn't know they were launching 5 different investigations. I just thought they were digging into some of these things and were curious or suspicious or whatever, following up on these things. But I didn't think that they were actually taking these things and launching investigations and FISA warrants. Yeah, based on hearsay, you better believe that's a problem. Bruce Orr's admitting that. Bruce Orr said that he also, at some point, began speaking with the Department of Justice Criminal Division. And the 3 people that he spoke to on several different occasions and gave information to were Bruce Swartz, Andrew Weissman, and Zainab Ahmad. And of course, Weissman and Zamad ended up on the Mueller witch hunt team. Oh man, you talk about a conflict of interest. That's a problem. At some point, Andrew Weissman's going to be in front of a grand jury, or at least in front of Lindsey Graham's committee, and that ought to be a blast. They're going to just cut this guy to shreds, man. Cut him to shreds. And also, we learned from Bruce Orr that Christopher Steele was very upset that the FBI had not paid him his last installment after he was let go as a paid source. And he kept emailing Bruce Orr about it. At some point, Bruce Orr says, he says, we quit meeting because Steele quit coming to the U.S. because by then the cat was out of the bag. It was too hot to be in the States. He didn't want to come here. But he was emailing me a lot and wanting me to try to talk to people at the FBI to try to figure out why they hadn't paid his last installment after they fired him. Bruce Orr says that he met with Lisa Page and Andrew McCabe in McCabe's office on July the 30th, 2016. What's significant about that? It's the day before they launched Operation Crossfire Hurricane. And when you read through this whole testimony and look at everything we've learned up to this point, we can now pretty carefully be sure of what Operation Crossfire Hurricane entailed. Essentially, what Crossfire Hurricane was to flood the media with all kinds of fake dossier information, wait for the media to report on that, and then to use that to justify investigations that they were doing. It was a media leak strategy. Media leak strategy. That is what the FBI did. It's almost like, and you think about the FBI as being an investigative agency. They're out there, talking to sources, talking to witnesses, hitting the streets, doing the hard physical work, the hard work of investigation. No. This Operation Crossfire Hurricane, they were sitting back, using various people around the dossier, using those people to pump that information, and they were pumping some of it out there themselves into the media, then sitting back, waiting for it to come on TV or be written about in a newspaper or on some blog, and then they would use that to justify another portion or another step in their investigation. Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. This is bad. It's really bad, my friends. It's all coming out. Steele was also getting worried after this whole thing started to blow up. Steele was getting very worried that he was going to be outed, and of course he was. And it was, in fact, Glenn Simpson told Bruce Orr that a media outlet was going to out Steele, and that at which point that was passed along to Steele. Then Steele started getting very nervous about what was going to happen once he was outed. And so he was emailing Bruce Orr and asking him all sorts of technical questions about what a special counsel can and cannot do. And he was concerned whether the special counsel could question him or force him to come and testify, or whether they would come to the UK and force him to testify. And he was very concerned and worried about that. We learned from Bruce Orr that he has never spoken with John Huber. As far as he knows, his wife has never spoken with John Huber. And about the dossier or anything about Spygate or any of this or anything in recent history. But he does know John Huber pretty well. He has worked with him years ago in the past as a prosecutor. And so he knows John Huber, but he says he's never spoke with him or had any any interaction with him regarding the Spygate or the dossier or anything like that. Also, we learned something else. Remember, we learned about that little meeting when Christopher Steele came to the States and he personally met with Bruce and Nellie in a little coffee shop in Virginia. We're now learning that there was another individual, a younger man, who accompanied Steele at that meeting. Bruce Orr could not recall his name. So there was a fourth person in that meeting. We also learned that the main primary FBI outlet, because remember, Christopher Steele was pumping information that was being pumped. It was being pumped to him from Nellie and Glenn Simpson at Confusion GPS. That was being pumped to Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele was then pumping that information to the State Department through Jonathan Weiner, and he was pumping it into the FBI versus his handler, Michael Gaeta, Gaeta, who is FBI station chief in Italy, I believe. Here you go. Rodenstein. Rodenstein learned that Nellie was working for Fusion GPS in October of 2017. That's what Orr says he knows. But let me tell you, my friends, from what I've covered here on TowerGate over the many months, I can tell you, just adding up the, adding things up, no way. This is what Orr believes about Rodenstein, October 2017. I can assure you that Rodenstein knew within probably a week of being confirmed as a deputy AG about Orr, Nellie Orr, working at Fusion GPS, the dossier, and the whole 9 yards. And we know that from what Rosenstein did immediately after becoming deputy AG. We learned that neither Bruce or Nellie were ever interviewed by the Mueller team. Bruce and Nellie have never been interviewed by Uncle Bob. How about that? Should it surprise us? He was briefing freaking Andrew Weissman and another member, Ahmad, or whatever her name is. Steele was also passing information along to another State Department hack, friend of the Reverend Clinton, named Kathleen Kavilick, Cavilick. And Orr had conversation with her. She was also getting information from Steele. Bruce Orr says he last contacted or had contact with Steele in November of 2017. And that Steele at that time was worried about the safety of his source. And I assume we're talking about either Halper or Downer. Either Halper or Downer would be my guess. But if you take this total time, if his last contact with Steele was November 2017, that's a year after Trump wins the presidency. They're still going on for a year after that. And we know they started back in July. So that means about 15 months. The Steele Orr thing went on for 15 months. Unbelievable. There's a lot to diagnose about this. I'll be working on this some more, and we'll get back to more of it tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.